It's Halloween time. The time for leprechauns, banshees, pixies, and hobgoblins to hold their annual powwow.
Yes, and the old witch rides through the skies on her broom.
Not this year, Lena. But this year she streaks across the Milky Way with her knobby knees buckled into Bob Hope's toothbrush. There she goes.
But how would the witch get to know Bob Hope?
How are we all doing? Hello, you beautiful f***ing nerds. So good to see all of your smiling and horrified faces. As you can see, Halloween is upon us. I know it's September. Shut the f*** up. Today we're going to explore the mental health benefits that horror can give you. And this is a topic that has been on my mind for a while. It's interesting because I did not find much of this specific topic explored online. There are a few, but most people talk about the problems that watching horror can cause. But be honest with me, how many people do you know that are super into horror movies but are also serial killers? Maybe that's a bit of a stretch. A lot of articles and essays I found only talk about how watching horror every day will break your brain and will force you to go out into the night, preying on young men, waiting for the perfect moment to suck on them to relieve your murderous actions. Cringe. I can see why normal people would think that Scream is not a comfort movie. We horror fans get the piss taken a lot and ridiculed, misunderstood, because our comfort movies aren't to do with finding true love, but about finding teens in the woods who are f***ing and impaling them both at the same time. It sounds bad on paper, I know. Why do we horror fans love blood and guts and ghosts and ghouls, and why do we, more importantly, find immense comfort within these films? Well, people have tried to explain. Dr. Barbara Johnson quoted another doctor, Dr. Glenn Waters, that's a lot of doctors, who identified three primary factors behind an attraction to the horror genre. Number 1, tension. Producers and directors use elements of shock, gore, suspense, and terror to foster feelings of tension. It's what keeps you on the edge of your seat during the final chase scene. I'm never on the edge of my seat. Relevance. Many horror movies have some level of relatability or relevance to the viewers watching. Universal relevance draws on shared fears of death, the unknown, or other social issues, like mob mentality in Halloween Kills. Unrealism. While special effects have become more scarily realistic, most viewers are able to recognize that what they're watching on the big screen is not real. Horror movies and TV shows will even use soundtracks, humor, and certain camera angles to remind viewers that what they're watching isn't real. Tastes like death. Link to both of those articles and studies in the description below. Now, these three factors do outline why we love and relate with horror movies on a surface level. The problem is that these seem withdrawn from actual experiences that horror fans deal with. Like I said, on the surface, these do outline why we love these films, but I think that it goes much deeper than that. Horror movies are an extreme within the spectrum of film. It's bloody, gory, and most importantly, it intentionally aims to scare and disturb its audience. This is the biggest appeal about the genre, as often we take pleasure in seeing people we hate be horribly killed on screen, and the genre is very much aware of this, as we see intentional dickheads who are intentionally written to be dickheads be brutally murdered within the respective films. But I think there's a correlation between trauma and horror. People who have experienced some sort of trauma in their life are often more likely to enjoy horror movies. But again, I think we need to take a step back. A large part of the horror community is queer-oriented in one way or the other. Why is this? It's quite simple, actually. It's because most of the queer community experiences some sort of trauma in their early lives, because of the fact that they are different than the rest of society. And as we all know, if someone is different to us, we need to tell them that in any and every offensive way possible, as if they wouldn't already know. This following statement is assumptive, and I'm putting a lot of people under an umbrella, so if this does not apply to you, tell me how wrong I am in the comments. It is only natural that people who have experienced trauma in their lives wish to seek out a way to retroactively have control over those traumatic experiences. And what better way to do that than binge teenagers being slaughtered? I'm sure a lot of us who have been bullied in high school wish that we could go full Carrie on our classmates on prom night. I'm sure that a lot of us wish to go full Jason Voorhees against people who have wronged us. In a sense, we seek out horror movies to have the illusion of control in our lives that we wouldn't otherwise have. And this is because traumatic experiences tend to project themselves into anything related to the experience. And within horror, a lot of people are traumatized to the core. This goes back to the relatability aspect of why we seek horror. We want the final girl to kill the slasher villain. We want the monster to blow up the castle. Because this gives us a sense that there is a happy ending to trauma. That there is a reason to keep going despite everything that happens to you. At the same time, a lot of horror movies end with melancholy, or a straight up hopeless ending. Which kind of contradicts what I was just saying. Why are we attracted to these regardless? Because it makes us still feel some sort of relatability of hopelessness. There are characters in these films that we can imprint on and relate with, be that people who get killed first or the slasher villains themselves. We also seek these horror films out to gain a sense of safety, despite horrible things happening on screen. There's this article I found that quite nicely outlines this. Consider the experience of watching a horror movie. You're hyper-focused, present with the television. Your mind hooked by a tight leash to the film's threat. You're stressed, sure, but as opposed to anxiety's relentless spiral, this stress is directed, and there's a cap to it. You're not actually scared that Samra from The Ring is going to crawl all jittering pixels and pointy elbows out of your TV screen. Your sympathetic nervous system responds as though she is, activating the involuntary processes of the fight or flight response. Increased heart rate, raised blood pressure. But in your heart of hearts, you know she's not. You know that you're safe and sound in your living room. People who experience depression and anxiety in their lives are also more likely to seek out horror. And again, this is in relation to previous traumatic experiences, and I'm not aiming to call anyone out on this. You could very well have had a normal childhood, never have been bullied, never had to hide who you are, never had any traumatic experiences in your life, and you still love horror movies. But you're very likely in the minority. The article I mentioned earlier outlines this too. The experience of anxiety and depression exists so far beyond language that only metaphor can begin to adequately describe it. Horror gives a face to the monsters which lurk in our own minds. To kind of explain this, people who seek out horror and are big fans of it and have murderous slashers as their comfort movies are trying to compensate for their own depression, anxiety, PTSD, or any other sort of problem that they have. With these films that are very much comforting to them, this is because it gives their experiences a face. It gives it something to put against, to relate to escape from. Horror is an escapist form of media. Even realistic horror such as Scream or even true crime is escapist. And we all know that we love to escape from the mundane lives that we all have. I wanted to explore this because I see a lot of people kind of imprint on horror movies and have slashers as their comfort movies, myself included. I can put on Scream any day of the week and have a good time with it. It comforts me. That is probably due to one of the reasons I've described today. And a lot of horror fans are in fact queer and do in fact face PTSD, anxiety, or depression. And I think it's important to be self-aware of that to an extent. Loving horror movies doesn't make people f***ed up. People who love horror movies are f***ed up from the beginning. One last thing before I go, there is a Kickstarter for a documentary called Horror and Mental Health, or Mental Health and Horror, I'm not quite sure. Please support it. I've put the link in the description. It's not my thing, it's got nothing to do with me, but I think it's for a great cause. People who love horror aren't sadistic maniacs. Most of us. I would like to thank all of you for watching all the way to the end. If you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me about all your favorite horror movies, and